Welcome to the Communication Diva Podcast, episode 28. This week's podcast is the last installment in a three-part series by the Communication Diva on communication styles. Today, it is assertive communication. For those of you following along at home, you have probably guessed that while passive and aggressive communication styles are common but not ideal, assertiveness is a better approach for effective communicators. So I strongly encourage you to listen to this podcast on assertive communication because I think it is an important part of an effective communications approach. You know, assertiveness may work, but it just isn't as funny as passivity and aggressiveness.
Welcome to Communication Diva. I'm Jen Swanson, and I'd like to thank you for spending some time with me today. Happy Canada Day to all you Canadian friends out there. Happy 4th of July to my American friends. And happy Monday to the rest of the listeners around the world. I'm not sure if there are other holidays that I'm missing, and if there are, I hope you let me know. But it's been kind of a rainy time here. We're not getting much of a summer here in British Columbia, Canada. It's been quite ugly. We've had one or two sunny days, and already we're into the 2nd of July, and it's not looking good out there. I feel bad for all the people that have gone camping this weekend. I had to work part of the weekend, so I am not off having any kind of holiday yet, but I am going back to New York at the end of this month, just around my birthday, and I'm going to be speaking at a conference called 140 EDU, The State of Now, and it's an educational conference, and I've been asked to be a guest speaker there, so I'll be talking about social skills and social behavior and what kids need to know that they're not learning in school. So I'll keep you posted on that and let you know more about it. And eventually that speech will be posted on the internet, a video of it, and you'll be able to see it. So I'm looking forward to that. So today is the third and last in our series of behavioral styles. And today we're going to talk about how to be assertive. So being assertive doesn't mean getting your own way all of the time. The main benefit of having assertiveness be your default position is that you're both respecting the other person and, most importantly, you're respecting yourself in the interaction. And as we have explored in the past several episodes, episode 25, 26, and 27, abusive, passive, and aggressive behavior lacks this key ingredient of respect. So episode 25 was about abusive relationships, and that one, in abusive relationships, the person doing the abusing is not respecting the other as a human being at all. And the relationship is actually more about power and control than I think it is about communication. And the same goes to a lesser extent with an aggressive person. So sometimes the lines between aggression and abuse are blurry, but the same sort of thing happens. The person that is doing the aggression or the exhibiting aggressive behavior or abusive behavior is more interested in themselves and really doesn't give a dang what the other person is feeling or thinking. And so that's lacking respect, right? The aggressive person respects themselves, but doesn't respect the other person in any way. In the passive behavioral mode, the passive or non-assertive person might well be respective of the other person, but they're not being respective of themselves or of their own needs and wishes, which then leads to, as we spoke about in a couple of episodes ago, all sorts of self-esteem and anger issues. Because if you're not being respected, even though you don't say anything out loud, it's affecting you inside. And that tends to fester and to build up and to cause all sorts of problems, some of them manifesting themselves in physical ways. So it's not a healthy way to be. all of the time. Now, again, as I said in another episode, sometimes we move into aggression, sometimes we move into passive modes, and sometimes we have to do that depending on the situation we're in and the circumstances. But the default that is optimal, the default that is the one that you really want to strive for, is the assertive behavioral style. And so let's take a look at that. Today we're going to look at assertion and interactions in which both people are being treated respectfully. So this is a particularly useful way to interact, especially in a professional setting, but really in any setting. It takes practice though, and there are particular skills that you can work on in order to become more assertive. So we'll talk about those in a little bit. But first, let's take a look at what assertiveness looks like. So the first thing is standing up for yourself. Assertive people don't allow others to say or do things that are unfair to them without commenting upon them. Now, you can't control what other people say or do to you, but you can control how you respond. So standing up for yourself in a calm but firm way is a sign of assertiveness. Stating very clearly how the words or the behavior of the other person have affected you and how you feel about it is an effective skill. So what you say may not have any effect upon the outcome, but at least you'll feel better inside that you have addressed the unfairness. So remember, you can't control how other people behave. You only have control over your own actions. So if someone has said something that has offended you, the best thing to do is to say something, and say something immediately, and say something carefully. And the best way to do that is to say how it made you feel, right? So that's standing up for yourself, not letting somebody else run right over you. The second thing is to make your own choices. So assertive people have a say in what goes on, and they don't allow others to decide or to dictate what happens without some kind of input. Assertive people make thoughtful decisions while respecting their own needs and those of others. So allowing your opinions and your thoughts to be heard by others in making choices. And that's an important part of being assertive. A third thing is acting versus reacting. And I did a whole blog post on that at one point, if you are interested in looking that up at communicationdiva.com. But if you are assertive, you will act according to your own values and beliefs and try not to react to the actions of other people. And this is hard to do for many people. It takes a lot of practice, but it means doing what you think and know and feel to be the right thing despite what other people are doing around you. So, I come from a Christian background, and I go back to the Good Samaritan story, where it might not have been the popular thing to do, but it was the right thing to do, was to help the person on the floor, on the ground, who was hurt. That's one common example. Other examples would be, in the face of peer pressure, doing things. The one that I spoke about in the blog post was a person that was riding the bus every day who turned to the bus driver at the end of the ride and said, "Thank you." And the bus driver just ignored her. She got off the bus, and her friend said, "Well, why do you continue to be nice to that person when they're so rude to you?" And she said, "Why would I let that person dictate how I behave?" And that to me is really important. That's acting versus reacting. Why should I be rude just because someone else is rude to me? That's a bad reflection upon me. So an assertive person would be able to say, I'm going to be polite no matter what happens, right? The fourth thing that I wanted to talk about here, as far as what assertiveness looks like, is respecting boundaries. So the assertive person respects the boundaries of others as well as their own boundaries. They don't allow others to cross those, and they try to be respectful of the boundaries that other people have put up around them. And this is very different in an aggressive person who crosses all sorts of boundaries all of the time. It is different in a passive or non-assertive person who allows their own boundaries to be continually run right over. So the assertive person is someone with clearly stated boundaries who gains respect from others much more easily because of that. You know, if someone asks you to stay and work overtime for them and you're not able to because you have another commitment, if you say, no, I'm sorry, I've got other things that I'm doing, I'm not able to this time, maybe another time, that will actually earn more respect than saying, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't think I can, but maybe I'll see, doing the whole passive beating around the bush apologetic thing is not going to be as respected, which sounds funny, but it's true. A fifth thing that points to what assertiveness looks like is being comfortable with yourself. An assertive person is comfortable in their own skin and doesn't need to put other people down in order to make themselves feel good. Neither do they need to build themselves up by bragging or boasting in order to feel worthy and better than everyone else. And this comes back to a healthy respect for oneself and a really good knowledge of one's limitations. So knowing what you can and can't do in a realistic way and being comfortable with that. Those are all things that have to do with what assertiveness looks like. So let's talk about some benefits of being assertive. Assertion prevents stress. People who are aggressive cause stress to others. People who are passive are often experience stress as a result of unhappiness and anger that builds up inside. And I talked about the festering. Stating assertively what your needs and wants are, whether you actually get them or not, alleviates stress and can help you be a more healthy person. So being assertive prevents a certain amount of stress. Now, it's not going to prevent all stress, of course, but it can prevent a lot of the stress that goes along with communicating with other people. Assertion can prevent confrontation in some cases. Sometimes clear, assertive communication can prevent that buildup and stress that can lead to a blow up. So if somebody does something that upsets you, telling them how you feel immediately will get it out of your system and prevent that low level, I should have said something, that can go on and on, sometimes for years. You've heard the stories of, Aunt Ethel said this at the family dinner and I'm so mad at her. And, the person relives that feeling, that emotion for years sometimes. And that has to have some kind of a physical impact. And what is the point of that? If the person had addressed it assertively right at the time, then they wouldn't be thinking about it 20 years later, right? So it can prevent confrontation. Festering resentment can build and grow and then blow up. And this is a common thing for passive people. And then it becomes this whole litany of problems with the other person, and it's really an unfair form of communication. So dealing with things that bug you as they arise is a much healthier way to behave. Assertive people earn respect. So you will find that the more you can be assertive, especially in a professional setting, the more respect you will earn from others. So assertive people set boundaries. They make decisions. They don't treat others or themselves badly. They are collaborative, and they are generally a lot easier to work with because you know where you stand. Assertion can reduce miscommunication. So assertive people are often better communicators. Assertiveness allows a person to say what they really want to say rather than saying something just to placate the other person. So it's quite possible to say something like, I don't agree with you, but I'll go along with the decision so that we can move forward. But I'd like the record to show that I'm really not in agreement. Now, that's a super assertive statement. Even though the outcome's not what the person would like to see happen, it's a very clear communication. Being assertive doesn't mean you're always going to get what you want, but it does mean that you are going to be very clear in how you communicate. So those are a number of different attributes of assertion. And here are some skills that you can practice to help you become more assertive. And there are probably more than what I'm going to list here. But some of the ones that I've got here are practice saying no. One thing assertive people do is they say no when they need to say no. Have you ever said yes when you really, really wanted to say no? If you have, then you've done something in a passive way, right? So practice saying no, and this can be really hard for people. It's easy to practice, though, especially if you are subjected to those awful dinner time telephone solicitation calls, which for some reason I'm on some list, and every day at 5 o'clock somebody phones to ask me to give them money or to do something, and it drives me nuts. You can use something called the broken record technique. You could call it the skipping CD technique, I guess, for those of you that don't remember what records are. But this is where you very calmly and clearly repeat your position without getting hooked emotionally by whatever the other person is saying. So a clear example for you is one that I've used with children many, many times. Children who are eating their dinner don't want to finish everything on their plate and want dessert, because they don't want to finish their dinner because they're full, but then they want the piece of cake or whatever it is for dessert. So a broken record technique would be something like, you can have dessert when you finish your dinner. And the child goes, and goes on about, how they're full and they're only full for dinner, but they're not full for dessert, or whatever the hysterics are. You can have dessert when you finish your dinner. You can have dessert when you finish your dinner. And if you just continue to say it in response to everything they try, because children are masterful manipulators, after a while they're going to give up, because they figure out that my position is not going to change no matter what's going on, what stunts they try to pull. This is the rule. If you're too full for anything else, you're too full. If you can't finish your broccoli or whatever's on your plate, then I guess you're too full for dessert. Right? And I'm just going to stick with that in the broken record technique. Now, you can use this in the face of peer pressure, for sales pitches, and for all manner of situations. It really works, but the only way it works is if you remain firm in your position and calm. Don't get hooked emotionally, right? So that's something you can practice. And again, you can practice it on telephone solicitors, salespeople, whatever, and see what happens. Practice decisiveness is the next thing. You can do this with simple things like the question, what should we have for dinner tonight? Right? In our house, that is a hard problem, because sometimes we're two people who used to be passive who are now working on being assertive, but who, I don't know what we should have. Decision making is hard. When you're out at a restaurant and choosing some food, practice stating what you really want, and do that without considering what might make other people happy. So if you can make your own decisions, beginning with the little things, you'll become more comfortable with the bigger things. The third thing is practice socializing. So if you're a very shy person or a passive person, social settings might be intimidating. If you're working in a job that requires a lot of human interaction, and the two cases that I use as an example in the work that I do is a medical office assistant or a nursing unit clerk. If you're a shy person and quiet, you might not be working as effectively and efficiently as you could be. If nobody hears you say that you need this, or you need to talk to somebody about this, or you're afraid to interrupt when, somebody in authority is talking to a doctor or whatever, you need to work on that. So practicing assertive skills includes being able to walk into a crowd and strike up a conversation with a stranger. And this can be terrifying to people. So one of the things you can do is try to do this by speaking to quote unquote random strangers in the lineup at the grocery store or at the bus stop or anywhere in public that you might find yourself. And there's nothing invested in these conversations. You don't know these people. You're probably never going to see them again. So it might seem scary and hard at first, but as with any skill, practice makes it easier. So try being the first one to start up a conversation, and that'll get easier as you continue on. So I hope that you've enjoyed this series of behavioral styles in communication. And if you have, I'd really like to hear from you. I look forward to any feedback and ask that you take a few moments to drop me an email or leave a comment at the site at www.communicationdiva.com. Come and see me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. I'm Jen Swanson. Until next time, happy communicating.